So thank you so much, Christine, for this warm welcome and all the support so far. And thank you so much. I'm so glad to see so many familiar faces here today within the panelists and all of those who are attending as well. And I'm so happy to see so many students who are coming back. It's so grateful to hear that this week has been providing for a lot of insight and a lot of already tools and goodies that you can already apply. And I truly, honestly hope that my session today will add a little nugget of inspiration to everyone's coaching. And I would just like to say before we begin that this is a topic that is dear to my heart. So thank you all so much already for just being here and being here with me. It's my absolute honor to share this space with you all. So at any moment, feel free to drop me a question on the chat box or to raise your hand. I want to make this our conversation and not my lecture, because that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to share simply my experience about something I've been exploring. And by no means this is the ultimate key to this intricate lock of partnership and consensual partnerships, but it's just one approach that I'm exploring that I'm hopefully inviting you to test for yourself and see what is in there for you, okay? So the reason I felt inspired and called to talk about consensual partnership is actually coming from a question that I've heard a few times from students this year, which is, how do you coach someone with who's going through something heavy emotional? How do you do that? How do you hold space? And what does space holding mean? So already deriving from my research and desire to share about consensual communication, I decided to draw from that content of consent, of partnership, into this connection and this idea of holding space through difficult moments. So before we step in, I would like to at least set a little context about me. And when I was talking about the consensual communication, teaching those webinars, I shared and came out to everyone as a people pleaser. So I think it's important to say that that's part of my nature. I'm a people pleaser. And I feel like in some way or another that influenced my path towards becoming a coach. So I feel here that there is also an honest desire and an honest curiosity to listen to people, to support people, and to help people. And I feel like most of us will share this, right? But what I would like to differentiate here is that I actually started from this fixing stage. And I think this desire to help and fix and solve the issues and the problems was actually what drew me to first study therapy. And I've been studying imagery therapy for almost 8 years now, and I feel like it's going to be a practice that I'll study for life. And there's something in this practice that will become crucial to this idea of consensual partnership that I would like to share later on. So to make relevant for today, I would like to share something that is quite personal to my upbringing. So growing up, I've always been a very sensitive child. And because of being a very sensitive child, I've experienced a lot of tension. And of course, I'm only understanding and realizing this now as I look back, as I heal my past. But as I look back, I can say that, yes, I was very sensitive. And being very sensitive made me very alert. I almost say with hyper alert to tension around me, especially because I ended up being bullied a lot through school. So I think that made me very on my toes all the time to make sure that I didn't do something that put me out there too much, that would trigger something else to happening, or that would put me in danger. In the same time, I started noticing other people doing that. So in a way, I've been growing inclined to pay attention to tension. And I wasn't labeling as that, but now with a bit more reflection, especially preparing for this, I can name it as that. So I think it definitely relates to this sensitivity and this vigilance. And something I learned through this vigilance is that actually everybody is negotiating with tension. In one way or another, we're all bargaining with this idea of tension. So coming back to this idea of me being a people pleaser, I became very good at noticing these tensions and then, of course, tried to solve them. And what did I do? I gave advice. So I became very good at giving advice to the point, and I shared that in the last webinar, that it started to really have a toll on me. I really felt pressured to do it. I really started putting a lot of expectations on myself to have the best advice, the good solution. And it started giving me a lot of pressure. And I noticed that I became very entitled to giving advice, or I entitled myself to just give it, may it be outside of the coaching context or within the coaching context. Except this was before I joined CMA. CMA really helped me transform and shift that mechanism. So what becomes interesting here in paying attention to me being an advice giver was that I started to connect to what was actually happening in me that propelled me to give advice. So I noticed that that impulse for advice giving came from when I started to feel that tension and my sensor for tension started to alert. So that's when my discomfort propelled me to start doing something about it. So this made me start to understand that this sensor of tension alert is actually me tensing up. So I became quite aware of how I'm listening to others, what effect does that have on me in my physical experience? And noticing how my discomfort kicked in, I started to be able to connect that to how I started to think for solutions and be propelled to actually act upon it. So, and you may resonate with this, and this is not new to you for sure. Something that I've learned from meditation and actually was emphasized by me going through therapy and by me studying therapy is that something crucial is to sit with discomfort. And here I would like to potentially replace this word of discomfort with tension for the context of our webinar today. So as we move forward, let's start to pay attention to tension in ourselves as we listen to this conversation here today, but also in future conversations. And it becomes important for me to sit with that tension, just paying attention to it. And as I've done that a lot, I've actually known that not all tension is bad. There are different types of tension. So I noticed that curiosity has a specific quality of tension in it. Playfulness, anticipation, resistance, difficulty, stuckness. These are just some few states in which I notice the element of tension to be a part of. Of course, we don't call these things tension, but there's something that is happening there. And my intention here in sharing this with you is to share that what I've noticed about tension is that most tension will pull towards a resolution or a release, like a bow and arrow, right? We don't fully hold that forever because we'll shake and be in that tension. No, at some point we want to release it, right? We want to let go of that tension. Yes, Louise, go ahead.
Hugo, thank you first of all for sharing. I mean, your life, it's amazing. Thank you so much. I'm all involved in what you're saying. With no slides and nothing. I mean, fantastic. Okay. And I have a question just that I understand properly. When you speak about tension, okay, what kind of, no, is it a physical tension? Is it an emotion? I mean, what is this tension? If, you know, maybe because you declinated tension in different kind of tensions. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you so much for bringing that up, Louise. And it's both. It starts as an emotional tension, but it's expressed through a physical sensation. And that's where the word discomfort comes from. So when it becomes physical, we may more easily recognize it as discomfort. Something doesn't feel right. But what's happening is that tension that may be either mentally, that we're like trying to sort something out, or maybe emotionally, something is craving to be expressed or pushing somewhere, and then that becomes physical. And I'm very somatic. And yeah, I think with Susan that brought out the fact that I'm a yoga teacher. So I've done yoga a lot for many years. So I'm very, very in tune with the body. And I come from an artistic background. So the body has been my vessel for communication a lot. So I connect the three realms a lot because I do feel like there's no separating them. The mind, the emotional, and the physical are all interwoven. So that really becomes an important aspect to this element of tension. So thank you so much, Louise, for sharing it. So coming back to this metaphor, we want to pay attention to when that tension we're upholding is yearning to be released or demanding to be released, because that's going to show us something. Now, bringing this back to this idea of consent and consensual partnership, I started exploring this word consent because I got curious about looking at it as something beyond just the idea of setting boundaries. And in researching around consent, I deconstructed the word into its Latin origin, in which it says that it's in agreement and also felt together. It comes from consentire. So consentire, with feeling. So I see here in this idea of consent, consensual, an opportunity to either communicate with feeling or show up with feeling. So definitely consent becomes here in this lens, of course, an opportunity for us to foster a better and more meaningful connection, and connections that are centered around feeling. May this feeling be in me being aware of that feeling within myself. May it be me becoming aware of that feeling on someone else. And we cannot talk about feeling and feeling each other without naming empathy, right? Because empathy is one of the most conductors for connection and for vulnerability. So definitely we need to make a big circle around it. And I'm a big fan of Brené Brown. Are there any Brené Brown fans here in the room? We have Susan. Just Susan? All right. If you haven't heard of Brené Brown, if you don't know her work, she is a fantastic researcher on shame, connection, and vulnerability. And she has two fantastic TED Talks and 1 hour lecture on Netflix. So her work is very accessible and many, many interesting books. And I would like to share her definition of empathy because it has some relevant aspects that I would like to share with you. So empathy, oops, let me just put this big. Oh, sorry, bear with me, just my technicalities here. And here we go. So empathy is connecting with people so we know we are not alone when we're in a struggle. Empathy is a way to connect to the emotion another person is experiencing, and it doesn't require that we have experienced the same situation they are going through in order to connect with them. And you can see that I've colored a few important aspects here. Definitely, we are not alone is important in empathy. Feeling that we're not alone. Connecting to the emotion becomes another aspect that I want us to retain here. And then in red, it doesn't require I have felt it before. in order for me to be able to connect to someone else. So these are just 3 segments of this definition that I want us to keep. And knowing that this definition is not ultimate, there are many other definitions. But today, in exploring what this consensual partnership could be, I would like to emphasize to the concept of partnership, specifically in the context of coaching partnership, that it's not just about letting the client decide where to take the conversation, right? We often tend to see partnership as that, giving the power back to the client, being in agreement with the client. But I see here that it's also about letting the other feel that they are not alone in what they're experiencing right now. Even if just for the moment of this conversation together, we are letting our client know that they are here, we're here with them, and we are letting them feel seen and heard. Hopefully, this is a parenthesis, right? Just hopefully we're supporting them feel that. Another thing that I would like to add to this concept of partnership from this consensual aspect of feeling together is this idea of connecting to the emotion. There's something in me that needs to feel or recognize at least what my client is feeling in order for me to be able to acknowledge that to the client and allow them to know that I'm witnessing them and that I can simply sit with it without having to do anything about it. And no matter how uncomfortable that emotion may be, I want to be able to notice it, recognize it, name it in myself. What does that make me feel when I notice this? And just sit with it, no matter how uncomfortable. And then adding again to this idea of partnership, this aspect of empathy is that I don't need to have felt that before in order to be able to project myself into the shoes of this person and imagine what they must feel or must be experiencing at the moment. And we cannot possibly have experienced all scenarios that everyone may bring, right? So we are all already doing this, but it's just inviting even more of this idea of allowing myself to step into the shoes of someone and just feel it for a moment. How is it that they may be feeling this right now in their experience? And we want to have here this capacity to just hold that space, to notice and consider, how does this make me feel in me? How am I experiencing while witnessing my client go through whatever they're going through? May that be positive, or may that be something that is more negatively connotated? Yes, Louise, go ahead.
Is it okay if I ask something? I'm not interrupting your flow of thoughts.
No, it's fine.
No.
It gives me a moment for a water break.
Okay. Yes. It's very interesting, this idea, right, of understanding, putting ourselves in the client's shoes. But sometimes probably the client, they're not able themselves to define what they're feeling, right? So is it just to understand, is it just to sit down with it without naming it? Yeah. Or is it also very helpful to acknowledge and to name? You know, we take a risk also because we don't know, right? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up. And let me clarify then. It's about me sitting with whatever raises in me, especially if it's discomfort. And I can name it for myself what I'm feeling in me, not that I have to project that to the client and tell the client what they're feeling. And I'll talk more to this in just a few segments, but thank you for letting me clarify that right now. So it's not about me needing to know what exactly the client is feeling. It's more about me being able to recognize I'm feeling something about it and being able to name it in myself. What is it that is going on within me? Thank you, Louise. And just to get myself back on track, when I started doing coaching, I noticed that I was doing coaching and not being a coach. And this is something that we emphasize here in CMA a lot, this difference between doing coaching and being a coach. And what I mean by this is that I noticed that I was performing what I thought a coach should act like, especially because I was coming from this therapeutic background and I knew that coaching was more, or I projected coaching to be more institutional and more corporate. So I was really trying to perform and place myself as like future-oriented and goal-oriented and goal-driven. So I really was acting in an image that I thought I should be. And actually this doing of coaching that I was performing became limiting not only to myself, but also it became the serving to my client. But it took me a while to notice how this performativity was actually not serving them. So becoming a coach really became a process of me allowing myself to show up as me and to really break down a wall between me and the client. And this is where this idea of empathy becomes important, because it really drives that connection. It really supports that connection of me taking off my attitude of I am the coach. I am here to perform this conversation. And it allows me to really just become more authentic as who I am and more present in that space with the client. And authenticity really here becomes this key word for how I want to show up in this being the coach. Being the coach is me and authentic. So this consensual partnership is one in which feeling is guiding the interaction, and it facilitates the connection between me and the client through supporting both of us to show up authentically. So it's not just me showing up as who I am, but it's also me allowing my client to show up as who they truly are and fully are in that moment by moment by moment, because that change, right? We're not constantly the same. We are ever changing within the conversation, because trust is something that we cultivate together. Connection is something that we cultivate together. And that for me speaks about vulnerability, right? We cannot be vulnerable to 100% immediately. We become vulnerable gradually. Let me just check here what Rajesh said. When we get connected emotionally, are there chances of losing objectivity? Example, psychiatrists who try to relate, but desist from getting emotionally involved. Well, there are moments for everything. And I will also speak to this in a moment. So it's not about all the time just paying attention to the emotion, but it becomes, again, to this, it all boils down to this moment of intentionality. And how is my intention serving the process that I'm guiding the client through? So let me hold on that spot for a moment. And if I don't respond to this later on, Rajesh, feel free to bring that up again at the end, all right? So can we, by simply listening, can that listening be enough to support someone feel seen and heard? And I'd like just a little show of hands or a chat box. Can just me listening be enough to help a client feel seen and heard? What do you think? Susan is saying no. Can you tell me more?
Yeah, if you're just listening without engaging, I don't think your client will feel seen and heard. Because what's the evidence that you've heard them? You have to give something back.
That's beautiful. Exactly.
Yeah.
We need to give something back, and we'll speak to that in a second. Francis said, no, depends on what you are doing and what you are hearing. Exactly, what we're paying attention to. Go ahead, Nish.
Yeah, I think it's important to emotionally feel what somebody is saying, because they are necessarily coming to you from a point of some pain in their life. And if you don't showcase that you are emotionally getting, maybe not very involved, but understanding and connecting to their pain, I think it may probably be very superficial what you would respond.
Exactly. And also, in resonance to what you said, Roy added, we need to acknowledge at least in order to allow someone to feel heard. But sometimes just the fact of allowing someone to speak can be enough.
Yes.
Yeah, right? Okay. So ultimate answer is it depends. So let's give it at that.
Can I,
Kathleen?
Sorry.
No, sorry. No, please.
All right, Louise. Okay, go Nish and then Louise.
I had a question to ask. You were talking about empathy. You know, there is a very thin line from empathy to become sympathy.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens to the coach when instead of empathizing, you start sympathizing? Because I just quote somebody the other day. She's a friend of mine for 40 years and she has a serious anger management issues. I'm very proud to say that she has not got a single bout of anger in the last 6 days, but it's very, very difficult because I know her personal life so well. I know what is bringing the anger to her. It is so difficult to detach, you know, in a way with the client whom you know so well, because otherwise 5 minutes back you are so emotionally connected and suddenly you can't build that. It's very hard to build that wall, you know. So I just want to understand how would one address a challenge like this?
So not to respond to the specific challenge that you experience, I would like to speak to the difference between sympathy and empathy for me today.
Okay.
For me, sympathy is feeling for someone, meaning I feel sorry for you or I feel angry for you because that's frustrating or whatever. Whilst empathy allows me to remain in myself, to stay in myself and feel with the other person. So it's not creating a distance nor a gap between me and the other person. It's more putting us on the same level and me just simply being there with the other person. And for that, I really feel like it's important for me to feel inside myself what is mine and what is the other person, so that I'm not projecting in that experience. Can this be okay for now, Nish? Great.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes.
Great. Louise, quickly, and then Sarah, so that I can
I have
continue,
just a very quick question because it has been on my mind for a long time. Compassion. Then is another, because it translated in my language in Italian is very different. So, I mean, it's, you know, what is the difference then between empathy and compassion? I don't know whether you would touch on this in this, okay. And that is,
I'm not gonna speak so much to the difference between empathy and compassion because I feel like they're tightly interwoven, but compassion has more of a broader quality and state of being for others in relation to others. And I feel like it involves a lot more of this self-love and loving the other simultaneously, whilst empathy, it's more of this active engagement of me and you in the moment. I like to see it as something more physical that we practice together, whilst compassion is something that I cultivate in general. And it's really relative to my inner state as well. Do I have the space to be compassionate? Do I have the space to be empathic? But yeah, let's not bring that too much here. And Sarah, is it still relevant for you? Do you still want to say?
Yes, it's in response to what Nish brought up. So I thought it might be helpful to him and everyone here in remembering that we as coaches are in service of our clients. This allows us to stay with empathy and not step into sympathy. Because when we sympathize and then when we carry the emotions that our clients are struggling with or suffering with, then how can we be of best service to our clients in that state? So if just remembering that is very helpful to me. So I hope it adds to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for adding that. So if I continue, just because I'm aware of time and there's still so much that I want to share, and I'll try to keep it brief. And thank you, Ben, for your beautiful sharing. I like this perspective that Ben, our founder, is sharing. Empathy refers more to generally our ability, and compassion is those feelings and thoughts to help. And I feel like empathy precedes compassion. Exactly. I feel like compassion as well is a higher stage. And this is where I bring empathy to this more active element between two people. So something that I noticed, and I would like to make a tiny loop back to advice giving, is that when I was being given unsolicited advice, what I noticed happening in me was that I became reactive and defensive, depending on the moment. And something that I noticed here is that there is something that becomes really possible for me when I simply just share what I have to share without being interrupted. Then I become able to receive whatever suggestions are there. And this reminds me to something that Dr. Ben Coe, present here today, our founder of our beautiful academy, shared with us recently in the mastery level, that within the coaching and our client situation, there is nothing to be resolved by the coach. So actually being confronted to this really confirmed this idea that actually what I have to do is take a step back from this reactivity to give advice, from responding to my discomfort and really sitting with it. Actually, it makes my life as a coach easier in a way, because it takes away the responsibility for me to have to resolve or find the right solution for the client. And it actually gives space to the client to become more empowered. So if I'm not giving advice and the client is not becoming reactive or defensive to it, what is happening is that the client may remain in a more reflective state. And if the client stays in a reflective state, we're getting a more creative client, meaning that they're more able to see what is it that they want to create within their situation and within their experience. So here, what becomes important to me, if my responsibility is lesser to give advice and solution, what increases on the other side is what we were talking about earlier, is my need for listening. So I need to become more present. I need to level up with presence and with my listening. But what is it that I'm listening to if I am being distracted by my own experience, if I listen to my own discomfort, and if I listen to my own solution triggers coming up, I'm actually not really listening, right? I am thinking around my experience. So this is where, again, this idea of sitting with discomfort and being present with someone else's discomfort allows me to be more open and available to listen. And what is it that we're listening to if we're not listening to that solutioning reactivity? We are listening to the experience of the client. What is it that my client is truly experiencing right now? And what is it that we do? The best thing for us to do as coaches is definitely what we do best in CMA, is to make observations. So we start to make observations of client's experience. And here there's this element that we love to add in CMA, which is adding the science and using the science to really create impactful, transformative processes of coaching with people. And one aspect that we really like to apply to our methodology is positive psychology. And I started to notice maybe this idea that by paying attention to what is possible or to what is positive and what the client wants to create, there is inherent necessity to ignore what is negative and what is happening there for the client. And actually, we don't want to neither ignore nor run from it. What we need to see is how can we sit with it? And what I notice is that when I'm doing coaching, what happened was that I was running away from those negative things because they propelled my discomfort, because they triggered my solutioning giving and disrupted my thinking. So what I really wanted was to listen, but I wasn't sitting with that discomfort. So this is here the invitation. If I sit with discomfort, will I fall into this forbidden territory? And will I go into this quicksand of emotional drowning with the client? This was one of my honest fears. If I would pay attention to something that is slightly more negative for the client, I would not find my way out. Does this ring a bell to you? Have you felt that? Have you experienced that fear of, yeah, Francis? Good. And I see Susan also nodding. So yeah, there's something here for us to dare to step into boldly with this idea of nothing to resolve here. I just want to be present with it, just to hold that space boldly. And here, sorry, I got slightly distracted. So here, have you ever noticed, at this point, I would like to bring us in this direction. Have you ever noticed clients who come into your coaching situation with a problem and they actually start to tell you everything that they should be doing and want to be doing and haven't done? And yet, you know the client wants to do those things, but they're still, nevertheless, there in front of you? Yeah, I see a lot of nodding going on. So what is the question going on in your head in that moment when you're listening to the client complaining here? And complaining, I put in air quotes. Would anyone like to add? What is your question in the back of your mind? Susan, you have a big smile. Would you like to share?
What's stopping you if you know what you should be doing?
Yeah.
If you have all this knowing, what's stopping you from doing?
Exactly. For me, the question is, so what actually is the problem here?
Problem. Yeah.
Yeah. And we don't want to, of course, ask this directly to the client. That's not what I'm trying to do. What I am liking here is this slight shift that instead of asking, what is the problem? I would like to add where, but not where is the problem? Where is the tension? Where is the tension my client is experiencing? And I don't have to ask that. I just have to become aware. And I need to listen to my own experience because it's going to guide me. If I start to notice my own discomfort, maybe my client is going through some discomfort as well. Maybe there's an opportunity here for me to pay attention to their experience and maybe find here an opportunity to acknowledge it. So what is it that I can notice in my own experience that potentially informs me of what my client may be experiencing as discomfort or tension that be, you know? And this is where this idea of empathetic connection comes along again. They're acknowledging someone's experiencing can take us a long way, and not the long way in duration of conversation, but long way in connection and really connecting with someone. And something so simple like, wow, thank you for sharing with me what you're going through. It really looks like you are tired. There's a lot going on. Or something like, I can sense here that this really means a lot to you. And it sounds like what you're experiencing is really important and you really want this. And of course, I'm making this slightly hypothetical, but there's really here, I've experienced this week twice. Actually, it was funny because I got to see it in a similar way. Two men who are young parents. Both of them have a small baby. And both conversations were about them finding time for themselves. And all I had to say was, you are really tired. There's a lot going on. And you are really craving for some time for you. And all I saw was this. So this is what we want. This is what we're looking for, that little moment where we can take that pressure bottle and just go a little bit like, like a sparkling soda. We just want to support the client, open up their own bottle and relieve that tension a little bit. And another metaphor that I like here is maybe sometimes just acknowledging the elephant in the room is enough to let the client find some relief. And many, many times the client knows the elephant is there. But if we acknowledge the elephant becomes smaller. So that's what we want to support the client, because when that elephant becomes smaller, when that tension becomes a little looser, the client starts to open up more vulnerably. And through that vulnerability, that's where the content actually can go in more meaningful directions for the client. So my invitation here is not to dread the winter season of the raw emotions or more uncomfortable emotions, because it's through that winter season that spring blooms, right? And very poetically, spring blooms with vibrancy if we allow winter to really exist. So to wrap up, what is important is to know when to do this. We cannot do this without creating a trusting environment, a safe environment for our client. And this needs to be cultivated through the beginning till the end of the session. And to respond to the question earlier, we don't want to dramatize nor make more negative something that the client is already experiencing. What we want to do is bring that to the awareness and conscious of the client without making it worse. We just want to find that connection. And I like this idea that that emotions are just energy, and they're energy in motion, emotion. They're just moving. So all we want to do is facilitate that movement for the client. And if that movement is going anywhere, it's not deeper and downwards, it's actually higher up into the awareness of the client, if I would have to make that, make that into a metaphor, into space. So what becomes important here is that if we notice something the client is experiencing, we want to co-create this authentic and consensual partnership. We don't want to impose ourselves. We don't want to impose our views on them. And this is where this consensual partnership comes into place. We want to share what we've noticed, and we want to ask the client's permission, and we want to check in with their readiness and desire to look into that or explore maybe that experience that they're going through. And we want to do this together. So if we go there together. So like I said earlier, everyone is flirting or negotiating in some shape or form with tension. And we want to observe it when this tension appears both in me or in my client, because it can open up this pathway for vulnerability and connection. And we want to embrace the silence, to allow ourselves to sit with discomfort and allow the client to become reflective within that discomfort as well. And we want to do so because in those moments, when we drop our masks, when we drop our walls, when we feel what is truly there, that's when deep and meaningful transformation becomes available. And all we have to do is to go there together. So that would be it for me. So thank you so much for being here, for your wonderful questions, and I'm ready for more. So thank you, and I'll pass it over to Christina.
Wow, thank you so much, Hugo. Just from the minute you started speaking there, so much was resonating with me, and there was so much that, you know, my brain was kind of firing off, like remembering my experience as a human, as a coach, things that I've read, studies that I've looked at, and I've written loads of notes. And there's so many other like pathways that are opening up for me right now, but just one image that I think for now that I'm going to hold on to is that bottle opening and the sound. And yeah, I think that's a really useful thing that I can just anchor in my mind there. So thank you so much, Hugo. Yeah, it'd be so great to hear from anyone else who's got any questions or any comments or anything they'd like to share, anything that resonated with them, or any reactions to this.
Can I make a joke?
let's release some tension here.
Yes, bring it on, Louise. Let's hear your joke.
Well, if I'm thinking about my marriage. If I could do this, I would solve a lot of issues. Yeah, you see, you're right. I mean, when people speak, I did this in the past. Now, thanks to all this wonderful training, I have changed a lot. But when people speak, our spontaneous reaction is to tell them what to do. And it's the worst thing we can do. People just want to be listened to, right? And then, of course, you're adding a lot of other, abilities but also listening to ourselves. And I'm going to come to your mindfulness yoga, I think, class to be able to do that.
Well, I'm not teaching yoga at the moment.
I know, but it's so, that is the challenge then, to be able to feel ourselves, right? And our attention. And yeah, so we have to get to know ourselves very well. And you have done a lot on that, Hugo. I mean, you work a lot. But thank you so much for a wonderful presentation.
And something I would like to speak to that you mentioned is that I often joke to say that coaching is my lifestyle, because it truly is. The more I show up as myself, the more I'm understanding that no matter what type of coaching I'm doing, I'm actually coaching a human being and not a human doing, as we say in CMA. It's always going to be a real person in front of me. So actually, a lot of what I've explored or learned from coaching, I explored in my personal relationships. And a lot of what I explored in my personal relationships, I brought it into my coaching. So initially, consensual communication was nourished by coaching. And then from me testing it with my partner, with my family, and then bringing it back to a coaching context. And then again, with this partnership aspect, it's the same. So definitely, I hope this really improves your marriage. Practice it. Bring it home. Bring it home.
With my daughters too.
Absolutely,
You've got
Louis.
you're unmuted there. Did you want to share something?
Is that me?
No, Christine. I was just sharing with Louise her final comment, because she was like, and with my daughter. So I was like, absolutely. It's like with our core students, and they're like, we have no clients to coach. I was like, you don't need clients to coach. Just speak to the people that you live with a coaching mindset, and you will see the difference in communication. And do not think of your children of being so young to have such a conversation, because they have the awareness to distinguish the different ways of communication. My daughter once asked me, she was like, are you coaching me? So I looked at her, and I was definitely had my coaching hat on. And I was like, why? She's like, because you're not telling me, you're asking me. So the impact of such a conversation is evident to even very, very young individuals. So Louise, take it and fly with it. It's gonna do great. I promise, from my experience. Thank you.
Wow, actually, I've also tried a few, not full-on coaching conversation, but tried a few little pieces from it with my 6-year-old. And a lot of the time he ignores me totally about everything, but every now and again we have a wow, actually amazing things happen as a result of the technique. So even with a 6-year-old, it can, having that mindset. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, Susan, you do want to speak now. Please go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to thank Hugo for this session. It really resonated with me in terms of what's going on with me when my client is in front of me. I kind of get a little flustered at the beginning of the conversation, and it takes me a while to settle into the conversation. So I was thinking this will be really useful for me to just take a step back and reflect and find out what's going on with me, because I have recognized that it influences the quality and I dare say the length of my coaching conversations. So this is really good food for thought. And I know there's definitely a link between our thoughts and the way we're feeling. So I'm quite curious to find out what's going on with me in those moments. So thank you.
I'm very excited for you, Susan. Let me know. I want to hear from you.
Excuse me. No, Francis, no, because once Hugo was a supervisor in a session. Sorry, he said something related to this. You said, if I understood correctly, very important, that if we take away the tension, so acknowledging or being there, then we can work, right, on what is positive and possible. But first is better to get the client to get it out of the system in a certain way. How can I say? Yeah. Is it correct, Hugo? Did I understand correctly? Yeah.
Depending on the case, of course. It comes back to this idea, is this tension the client is experiencing on top, in front of, impeding the client to move into what they're desiring? So maybe, yes, let's open the bottle and acknowledge the elephant so that it can become smaller and we can spend less time looking at the elephant and spend more time then moving towards the desire of the client and the intentions of the client. So we have to kind of feel it and judge it. We don't want to always, if the client is already moving forward, we don't want to bring the client back, right? So this is where timing is important. But yeah. Francis, I just want to honor your hand because you had your hand up. Oh, I can't hear you. All right, you'll come back?
And while we're waiting for Francis, also just in case you haven't noticed, Ben has really kindly shared some gifts for us in the chat that you can download.
Yes, thank you, Ben. Go ahead, Eva. You had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Hugo. I really appreciate this today. I've gotten quite a bit, we'll call them aha moments. And yeah, even a perspective shift. The first thing that really shifted my thinking is looking at empathy. And, today's conversation with Evan, one thing that really caught my attention was how he was empathetic and didn't get into the emotions. And I was saying that must be a part of, as a coach, you really need to manage during the coaching process. And I was trying to figure out, ways of dealing with that. And so today you've made me look at it that empathy, you're required to have the client in a reflective state to maintain that reflective state. Hence, keeping your perspective that by being empathetic, you are maintaining that state. So I've never looked at it in that perspective. So yeah. Thank you.
And I would like to throw on that the idea of silence. Being empathetic, holding that silence, sitting in that discomfort of silence allows the client to really stay in that reflection that may have started for them and see what moves in there for them. So yeah, thank you, Eva. I'm so glad that this was able to support a shift in your perspective.
Yeah, and the second one was that tension, the discomfort you may be experiencing may be, we say the mirror neurons informing you of the emotions that you have. So it really brings out why in the MCC, they really say you need to coach, it's advisable to coach but who you are, your presence, who you are, because who you are is scientifically you working. So the mirror neurons actually are informing you of that tension
Yeah.
by listening to yourself. Hence, coaching with yourself brings out that. Hence, you're showing up as yourself. So that was a big thing, showing up as yourself has given me a better understanding for that. Yeah, thank you.
Beautiful, Eva. Thank you.
Irene?
Hey, thank you very much, Hugo. This has been a very interesting and illuminating session. I think the first thing that really struck me big was the distinction between doing coaching and being a coach. Doing coaching and being a coach. If we are being a coach, then it's not a cap that we put on and take off. It is something that becomes a part of our lives. And all these elements of holding the space, maintaining silence, and empathizing with the client becomes part of the attributes and the essence of our being a coach. And that for me is really very instructive and powerful. And of course, for somebody who is coming from a therapeutic counseling background, where you do all the talking and telling your client what to do, from the position of an expert who knows just exactly how you should be processing your emotions, this for me has been a big transformation. And what you have brought on the table today adds more to the character and the essence of being a coach. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Irene. And for me, this idea of being a coach, I don't want to separate it from this idea that I am being a coach as me as a person as I am today. And I am coaching a human being, a real person as they are today. So we have to negotiate with that, because I'm not always going to show up the same, because my capacity will not always be at the same level. So the same shows up for the person, and that may change throughout the conversation as well. So really being attentive to who I am and taking my time to do my practices as much as possible, really grounding before session really allows me to show up as more present as possible and remain in that space for as long as possible in the conversation. But yeah, being a coach, authenticity, human beings together. So thank you, Irene. Christina was taking more notes.
Yeah, I'm still scribbling away here when everyone's speaking. My brain's like, bam, bam, bam.
I heard
Right.
in one of the sessions someone saying that they went, I don't know if some one of you were present at that session, that he went on a 6-day silent retreat. I couldn't believe it. I said, I think I wouldn't even resist half a day. And I think it's something I will have to work on, I must say. But and now I understand, I mean, the importance of absolutely, yes, yes. Okay, I don't come from, yoga or all these kind of things. Okay, so it's quite a shift, and it's very, very important. I do now understand very well why. Thank you.
So very easily, we don't need to practice silent retreats to hold good silence in a conversation. Just my favorite tricks is, and I say it all the time, count until 3, count until 5. Let clients, when they're looking to the side, let them look to the side until they look at you. They'll give you a sign when they're ready to start talking to you. Let them wonder and think and reflect. And when they make eye contact with you, it's probably the time for you to come back. And if you're not ready to speak after they spoke, acknowledge them and let them know that you're just going to take a moment, and you're going to let them know when you are ready to share what you've organized on your thoughts. And there's another gift coming. Alert. Pay attention to your chat boxes. It's coming, it's coming.
I like the way we're all just waiting for it to drop.
Hugo, I learned a technique. let's pause for a moment. That's already something, let's
Yeah.
pause for a moment. That is helping me a lot, wait a second, hold on, because it's not so easy to learn it if you're not used to it, okay? But step by step.
Yeah, that's a beautiful one. As long as you're not interrupting the client speaking. Yeah. Yeah, letting always the client finish. Okay. So I'm just being mindful of the time. And we're gonna just give Ben a few more moments to upload it. I don't know if anyone has anything else to say. Wait, sorry, let me give the space back to Christina. My bad. Here I am just like hobbling the whole space again.
Well, I was just wondering if while we're waiting for our next gift, and maybe I'll share what I was actually writing at the moment when you spotted me writing. That particular bit that was connecting was about this idea of our self not being consistent and being okay with that in terms of our expectations. And I was connecting that with also this idea of the feelings that we're having may not be what we want them to be or expect them to be at that moment either, and being okay with that as well. And so this kind of thing where there's these expectations of who we are, who we're supposed to be right now, who we thought we were going to be from where we were this morning, and how we're responding to things, and then being able to sit with that and be okay with that, and also being able to sit with and being okay with whatever's coming up for the client as well. So yeah, that was just what was connecting at that time.
Thank you, Christina. And this for me about the doing, it fluctuating and changing. For me, it actually, I took it from the 4 Agreements by Don Miguel, Juan, maybe Luis, I don't know. The name escapes me, but the book is the 4 Agreements. And if someone please knows, drop it in the chat box. And one of the agreements is doing our best. Committing myself to doing my best, in knowing that my best is not always the same. And my best changes throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the year. So yeah, that's something that I read this book like 5 years ago, but this one really stayed with me, that doing my best will always fluctuate. But if I commit to doing my best, whatever that best is that day, then I know that I'll be somewhat at peace with what I've done. And let me check this question then, Rajesh, thank you for reminding me to look at it. Sometimes clients explain the situation so much as we as a coach tend to lose patience and interest. Yeah, very true. I've been there, done that. I'm gonna be very honest about that. It has happened to me. With such too much talkative clients, how do we achieve a balance in conversation, and how do we maintain empathy? So something that has supported me is this tool that was actually shared. I don't know who from the faculty members shared, maybe Evan or Alina, I don't know, but it was back when I was doing my core level maybe, or the advanced level, I don't know anymore, that you can establish an agreement with your client. So if the client tends to be more of a storyteller and not give you enough time to participate, agree on a gesture that is a polite way for you to interrupt the client in order for that conversation to be of service for them. Always making that emphasis on being there for the client. I'm interrupting you for your best here because we've agreed upon it prior, right? So yeah, I've had this gesture with one client who one time in our first session spoke for 45 minutes nonstop, and I asked 2 questions. And since then, in the next session, I told him like, yeah, last time I noticed that we talked a lot. So if I notice that is a good time for me to intervene, do you give me permission to interrupt you? And that allowed me to also just be more vulnerable and honest with the client. But yeah, noticing also what is propelling the client to talk so much, because for many people, it will be a defense mechanism. If they talk too much, you don't intervene, you don't change them, then they remain in their status quo. So it's also trying to understand, what is my client truly experiencing here? I don't know if this responds to your question, Nish. Yes? No? Potentially? All right, thank you. And yes, since the four agreements was released, there is a fifth agreement, but I didn't read it. So I don't know what it is. All right. Wonderful, I'm downloading it. Thank you, Ben, for all these generosity gifts. I feel like it's Christmas time here at the CMA International Coaching Week Federation, everything galore, abundance for everyone, many gifts. May us all continue to grow and learn and become more truly ourselves and intentional with our clients as two human beings present together. Christina, back to you.
Thank you so much, Hugo, and thank you to everyone here today, and also to Ben for our gifts. And I just want to remind everybody that obviously we've still got a few more sessions, and also for anyone that I'm not sure if there's anyone here that isn't normally part of, that comes to events, that there still are going to be more events after the conference is over. We always have our regular sessions as well, so there's more to join in with. I'm mindful of the time. Would anybody like to make any final comments or key takeaway before we wind to a close?
I could share something. Hi.
Hi.
I'm just doing the core training, so I'm not at all experienced with coaching, and I entered this coaching training not being sure what to do with it. I was hoping for, now that I know the words, I can use them. I was hoping for a transformation. I needed that. I felt that I needed something also for myself, for my inner me, not for me to do something with this coaching training. And okay, I could repeat practically and rephrase the entire session of today as for what I resonated with during the session. So it was totally more than interesting and very, very insightful for me. And but what I would like to share with you is that I during this training and training labs which we had, I really experienced a shift. And this is when I started to get some very powerful insights, especially from Hugo. So thank you. Now I think I know what I want to do with this training, because it made me aware that I really can be myself during coaching. And I really sensed some feelings and emotion and tensions in some conversations, and I was not sure that I, as a coach, should really take them and guide the client through them, so that the client gets aware and gets some deeper understanding and experiences a shift by this. So. Thank you. So I know what to do now with this training. So thank you.
And remember, it's a path. It's just one more stone in your path that you can step onto when you're ready, at your own time, testing it, feeling it, what is true in there for you. And yes, practicing makes perfect and leads us to the true learnings. So I would invite here, no rush, and just making it your own as you go. And thank you for that, Camelia. All right, is this it?
Yeah,
I think this is it.
everyone's had a chance to download the book, which has appeared. And yeah, if there's no more to say, then it's just thank you so much to all of you, and looking forward to seeing you at the next sessions that we coincide with. And a special thanks to Hugo, of course.
And
Fantastic,
thank you.
Hugo, really, thank you. You are yourself. You have been yourself. It's a demonstration. No slides, nothing, yourself. You brought yourself. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Louise.
Thanks, Hugo. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nish. Look
Yes,
forward to seeing
thank
you
you.
next time.
You have been a great inspiration to me. Thank you.
It means a lot to me. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Hugo and everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Okay.
awesome hosting, Christine.
Thank you.